Hi, my name is Zach Gill, and with all the political events with Donald Trump recently and how he's been compared to Hitler, um, I have thought about what life was like during World War II, and thankfully I have my grandma here to tell me about it. So, I know that you were born in Ohio. Where were you born in Ohio?
I was born in Toledo Hospital, and 1 year before I was born, your grandfather was born in Toledo Hospital. And 21 years after I was born, your father was born in Toledo Hospital.
Wow, that's pretty cool how you were born in the same hospital.
Yeah.
Was your father there in the hospital?
No, he was fighting in World War II, and he fought in, we didn't know where he was because he wasn't allowed to tell where he was. But I know he was at one time in England and France, Holland, and Belgium.
That's pretty cool. So, what are your earliest memories while your father was at war?
Um, it was growing up in the Old West End with a number of generations of family, and we lived in a house, a big old house that had 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. And I'm going to name the people that let's see. My grandparents lived with us. My great-grandmother sometimes would come from Bell Buckle, Tennessee and stay for a number of months. My Aunt Charlotte, my Aunt Corinne, and then Aunt Charlotte had my cousin Cindy. And then there was Frank, who was a friend of my grandfather's, which I never quite understood how this interplayed. And then my mother's cousin, Bill Powell, who was in the Navy, he was sometimes there. And then there was my mother and myself. So that's 10 people in the house with 1 bathroom,
That's a lot of
but
people.
5 bedrooms. And this was, my mother loved doing art. And so this was a blue star that she made and put in the window.
That's very cool. Did a lot of people do that?
Uh-huh. And after, I think, then you didn't see it for many years, but then after our last war, I think families started doing it. And you did hear about the Gold Star Mother, the Muslims?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay. And if you're a Gold Star, then that means that the soldier has died.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah,
so
I
if
knew
it's
that.
blue, then they're still in active duty. So it was growing up on Hollywood in the Old West End. I had a whole bunch of adults around me, and I was a very active child. So I would many times crawl up the cherry tree, and I'd get stuck at the very top. And my grandfather would have to come out and get me down. And they keep saying, please don't do this, because I mean, it was just over and over. I can remember doing it, but I love crawling up. I just couldn't, I'm kind of like a cat. I can't get back down. And then in the backyard, I had Rabby, and he was a big white rabbit, and cats. And when I got bored, I would slip out and let him out, and he would run up and down the street, and then all of those people that lived with us, all 8 people, would be chasing him. But it was very amusing to me, and I can remember that. And then probably the 10th or 11th time that I did it, somebody saw me do it, and I was in a lot of trouble. And so I stopped letting him out, but I can remember thinking, I read a book about rabbits, and the rabbit slept in a cute little bed. So I slipped the rabbit upstairs and put him in my bed, and he was kind of like paralyzed. And I thought, oh, is he all right? And well, I was 3.5, maybe 3 years old, but I still can remember this. And I pulled back the covers to make sure he was all right, and he had urinated all over the bed.
Oh, God.
And I got into a lot of trouble that time. And so my cats, and then my grandfather had a huge garden in back, and I would go out there with him and work in the garden and pick vegetables. And to this day, I love having a garden.
Nice. So, why did you feel like your grandparents were your mother and father?
Because my mother worked in a factory, as most women did at that time, because all the men were gone. And she also worked at the Charm Shop, which was a high-end women's dress shop in Toledo. And my Aunt Corinne managed it. And she was just, I don't remember, all I remember as a young child are my grandmother and my grandfather, and I call them Mother and Daddy.
That's very interesting. So, tell me about your mother's sisters who lived with you during the war.
Mother had two sisters, so there were three of them. They were all 2 years apart. And my Aunt Charlotte, who was the middle sister, classic middle sister, because she was a real character. And she was married to Jim, and Jim was in War too. He trained, he was in what now they call the Air Force, but he trained fighter pilots. And my Aunt Corinne, who was the youngest sister, was married to Kenny, and Kenny flew the hump. He flew from India to Burma, which was a very dangerous thing to do. Many of the pilots died. And, but he was very short. Kenny was very short and hated being short. And I think that he seeked to have thrills, and he did that many times in airplanes. And he was a little bit of a character himself.
So, how long was your father gone from you?
I didn't see my father for 4 years. So, and I do remember when he came back, it was in the fall, and they got me out of bed, and well, the only time we had a picture of him, and that's the only time I actually saw him, was a picture on the fireplace. And I thought he was going to be this magical, warm, wonderful person, and he was kind of grouchy. Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yes, well, he had gone through a great deal.
Right. So, when your father returned home, did he talk about the war?
No. Well, the first time he talked to me about the war was when we went to their friends, the All Houses. And when we walked in, well, first of all, I loved going to All Houses. I must have been like 8 or 9. And they actually had a TV, which was very exciting. The screen was about that big. And so we walked in, Jim Allhouse was sitting in a corner in a chair, and he didn't look up at us. He just was staring straight ahead. And Jane, his wife, took my father into the kitchen. And then my father came out, and we immediately left, and we were sitting in the car, and my father told me about that Jim had been a prisoner of war, and that he was having a flashback, which I kind of understood, but maybe my father went on and talked more about it. There were certain smells that they would remember. It would cause them to become very depressed. And he was a prisoner of war in Germany, I think it was Germany, because the only thing that they ever fed him was cabbage. So if you've ever smelled the cabbage cooking, it can be very unpleasant. So that was the first time he ever talked to me about it. And then I was probably in high school or middle school, and he told me about him being in a foxhole for weeks with, I don't know how many, but other men, and had to live there. They actually lived in the foxhole. And then the third time, and then he did say if you didn't believe in God, you would after that. The third time, my mother wanted to go and I was an adult then, wanted to go to the reunion in Omaha Beach, and that's Belgium, I think. It was World War II, and it might have been the 50th reunion, I'm not sure. And she was all excited about it, and my father became really, really angry and refused to talk to her about it, said absolutely not. There wasn't any way he would ever go back there. And I can remember her being really upset with him, but he didn't share anything else. That was it.
Is there anything else you would want to tell me?
It must have been like, I don't know, a year after my father died, so you've been 2 years old then, that my Uncle Kenny, the pilot that flew the hump, and by the way, Jim and my father and Kenny have been friends before any of the sisters married them. So they knew one another before any of them went to war. But Kenny said, you know, your father really changed when he came back. He was a really happy, talkative man, and he came back and he didn't talk anymore.
That's very sad, yeah. So, a couple weeks ago, you went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C.
I did.
How was that?
It was fabulous. When I told your grandfather I was going to go, and he said, you're going to get on a bus with a whole bunch of people you don't know, I said, I don't care, I'm going. And I got up at 4:30 in the morning. I marched with 3 other friends. They're a retired psychologist, a retired nurse, and a business owner. And we marched from 9 until 5:30, and then came back on the subway where we could not even breathe. There were so many people there. And Donald Trump has made me a wonderful person, because now I'm really politically involved. So yay, Donald.
Great. All right. Thank you, Grandma.
You're welcome.